Okay, well, our topic for this morning is defining Christianity. I seem to need to talk about that every couple of years because there's this ongoing debate, and I would say a certain amount of confusion about whether or not unity is Christian. That's a question that Karen and I get a lot. And whenever someone asks that, is unity Christian, I have to respond with a question of my own. The question is, why is that label important to you? Because it goes both ways. There's some people who want it, and other people have a bit of an allergy to it, if you know what I mean. I know a lot of people who don't come here anymore because I talk too much about the Bible. The Gospels, Jesus, all those stories. We're too Christian for more people than anyone realizes, and yet I would hazard an educated guess that probably 95% of the people out there who consider themselves to be Christians, who use that label, would never recognize 95% of what we teach as being Christian. We don't follow the Nicene Creed. We don't take the Bible literally. We don't teach that Jesus died for our sins, or that he's going to come again in physical form to sort us out and judge us. We don't believe in a literal heaven or hell. So, a lot of people believe that. That's what it means to be a Christian. If we tell people that we're Christian without saying anything more, and some of those folks come to check us out, and they hear what we teach, they end up thinking that we're a bunch of liars. We're not in integrity, false advertising, those kind of things. And then on the other hand, there are other people, if we tell them that we're Christian without saying anything more, well, plenty of folks won't want to set foot inside our doors because these are the images that come to mind, okay? Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, Jim Baker, Jimmy Swaggart, Fred Phelps, and the like. TV preachers who delight in telling everyone that they're worthless sinners, they're going to burn in hell if they don't believe the way they say we should believe or talk the way they talk and all that kind of stuff. So maybe the best way to answer a question like that is to simply say, we're unity. To some people, we're Christian. To others, we're not. And it all depends on how you or how they define the word Christian. Those of you who have been around Unity for a while, you probably remember that Unity used to be called the Unity School of Practical Christianity. Yeah. Practical. That's the modifier. Practical, practice, action over belief. Practical over dogma. That was the idea. We don't use the name anymore. It's a little bit cumbersome, but it's part of our history. It's there. Our co-founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, were looking for universal truth in the teachings of Jesus and the life of Jesus, and also other religions, things that could be used by everyone for their own personal benefit without having to become a Christian by baptism or any other rite or ritual or statement of faith or whatever. What Charles and Myrtle were trying to do was way more profound and subtle than anything that could be defined by just simply slapping a one-word label on it. All the way back in 1895, Charles was describing what they were trying to do. He was describing it like this. He said, and I wish I could imitate him as well as Jim Gaither could back at Unity Institute. I'm not even going to try, but Charles said this back in 1895. He said, "We have been readers among all schools of thought, and we find good in all of them. We do not claim to have discovered any new truths, nor have had any special revelation of truth. There is truth in every religion. It is my privilege to take truth from any source, put it into my religion, and make it a fundamental rule of action in my life."
That's good. He
said any source. Any source, including the Bible. And if unity sometimes seems to be a little more biased in favor of the Bible than the scriptures or of other faiths, I mean, why would that be a surprise or a problem? After all, Charles was a product of our Western culture. The Bible is a huge part of our cultural heritage. In fact, I would say that one cannot really understand Western culture fully without having some basic grounding and knowledge in the Bible and Christian history, because it really defines much of who we are. Like it or not, there it is. We need to deal with it. We need to own it. The big question I think we need to try to answer in unity is this. It's not whether we're Christian or not. The big question is, what did Jesus really teach? Put aside the label Christian, get to the heart of the matter. What did Jesus really teach? And that's the question that Unity minister and author Eric Butterworth was trying to answer when he wrote that book, Discover the Power Within You. Bestseller back in the late 70s, and that was the question he was trying to answer. And here is his take on Jesus. This is from the prologue. He said, the philosophy of Jesus is a workable philosophy, a way of life. Jesus taught of the depth of potential of man and of his spiritual unity with God. Strangely, religious groups have been the slowest of all to catch this vision. Isn't it true? Because I'll tell you what, spiritual unity with God wasn't something that I was taught growing up, and I grew up in a Christian home. Catholic, to be specific. I was taught that the only way you get to be with God, unity with God, was if you died in a state of grace. And to get there, you had to follow the commandments, you had to get the sacraments, and you still had to go to a place called purgatory where you'd be purified through some painful process to make you good enough to be with God. Now, I believe those ideas are changing. Some of them may even be gone now. But for me, the damage was done. Eventually, I said, no thanks. I don't care what label you slap on it. I want nothing to do with it. I'd rather be a Buddhist. Or nothing at all. That was an interim stretch there. I had no idea that there were these other ways of looking at Jesus in the Gospels until I read Discover the Power Within You. Basically, until I started attending a Unity Center. And I think I was hooked right at the beginning in the prologue where Eric starts telling this story about this ancient Hindu legend that you might have heard before. The story says, there was a time when all human beings had godlike powers, and they started to abuse their divine power. Now, those of you who are Star Trek fans, think of the character Q, all right? This all-powerful entity who's always abusing his power to harass Captain Picard and other human beings around the universe. So, the chief god, Brahma, decides that the only thing to do is to take the power away, to take the divinity away and hide it where people would never be able to find it. But Brahma couldn't figure out what to do with it. So he calls this council of the lesser gods, and they have this debate. And first they said, well, let's bury it deep in the earth. Or maybe we'll put it at the bottom of the ocean. Or maybe on top of the highest mountain. And Brahma said, no, there's no place on earth or in the sea that human beings eventually will not reach. Here's what we'll do. We'll hide this power deep down inside every person because they will never think to look for it there. And ever since then, the legend goes, human beings have been going up and down the earth, climbing and digging and diving and exploring and searching for something that they already have inside themselves. Discover the power within. Our greatest spiritual teachers in human history were great because they discovered this best kept secret of the ages, which is the divinity, and call it the power that's within us. And look at what happened to a lot of them. A lot of spiritual teachers wanted to let us in on the truth. Some of them were killed for their trouble. And then other times we see this interesting human situation where the people hear what the teacher has to say, they ignore the message, and they turn the messenger into a god, and they build monuments to them, and they worship them as if they are the power and the divinity, and there it is again out there someplace. Buddhists did it, Christians did it, Hindus did it, They have all done it. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got no problem with doing things to show that we honor and we respect a great teacher, or doing things to show our gratitude for their teachings. The problem is when we forget about the teachings. Eric wants to make sure that we don't do that, especially when it comes to Jesus, because he is the best known teacher in our Western culture. One of the most common affirmations that you're going to hear in Unity Centers is the one that goes like this: there is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life. It's a good affirmation, but it needs to be fine-tuned a little bit. This is something I talked about last year around Easter time. It needs to be fine-tuned a little bit, because if we take that affirmation and turn it into a graphic, this is what we get. This is what we get. One presence and one power in the universe. The big circle is the universe. The small circle is in the universe. What do you see up there? One thing or two things? Two things. In order for something to be in something else, it has to be smaller. And you're actually talking about two things. You're getting away from one presence and one power. It's unavoidable. Or if we use the rest of it, in my life, same thing, right? Big circle, my life. Second circle, in my life. We end up saying that it's less than the universe. It's smaller. It's limited. It's separate. That's not what we want to affirm. When I say one presence and one power in the universe, my language is setting up separation, limitation, duality. I'm making something smaller than the other thing. So maybe there's a way that we can fine-tune this so that it works just a little bit better. And this is the one I suggested last year. Very simple. There is only one presence and one power that is the universe and my life. All of it. Every single bit of it. No separation. That's what we get out of the life and teachings of Jesus. And we also see this reflected in many other traditions as well. And the followers of Jesus, they happen to see him as a living demonstration of that one presence and one power in action. That practical side of it. And then what was that other little thing that Jesus told his students, according to the Gospel of John, that so many people seem to forget about? This verse here where he says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing. And they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father." In other words, my time is up. You know what was going to happen. My time is up. I'm out of here. It's up to you. And you can do the same things because you are just like me. It's in every one of you. You just don't know it yet. That's all. You just don't know it yet. So when we use the word Christ in unity, we're using it to describe that cleverly hidden power, that one presence, that one power that is the universe and us, our lives, life itself. And for us, in the Western Hemisphere and Western culture, Jesus demonstrates one of the highest expressions of that power in terms of his compassion, his courage, his integrity, his dedication to making the world a better place for himself and for others. And that's the reason behind another affirmation that we hear a lot in unity when we say, "I behold the Christ in you." We can change that too. We can say simply, "I behold the Christ." I behold the Christ. In you implies limitation. I behold the Christ. All of you. Every bit of you. So when I look at what Charles and Myrtle were trying to do when they started this whole thing up, what I see is this. They just wanted to help everyone to be the very best Christ that they could be. To discover that cleverly hidden one presence and one power, and then use it to make the world a little better place for themselves and for others. In his book, Eric calls this the Great Decision. He says that it's a matter of earnest resolve to see ourselves in a new light, the light of the Christ and of our own unique unity with God. And then it is the determination to act as if I were, and I shall know that I am. That's the great decision. And he also tells us that in order to do that, you don't have to call yourself a Christian. Eric says that non-Christian truth students shouldn't get hung up on the word Christ. You can substitute something else. Perfection, Buddha nature, divinity, whatever works for you. In fact, he says that there are people who deny that Jesus ever lived, and they can still catch the essence of what the Gospels have to say, and they've changed their lives forever. So unity can't be all things to all people, and we shouldn't even try. This is who we are. We have a perfectly valid interpretation of the life and teachings of Jesus. And if you want to call that Christian, you're perfectly entitled to do so. Nobody can tell you otherwise, with the understanding that they may disagree, but you're entitled to do that. If you'd rather not use that label, you would be perfectly consistent with what Charles and Myrtle wanted to accomplish. They wanted Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Catholics, Protestants, humanists to be able to benefit from their work without having to relabel themselves or convert or anything like that. So don't let anyone else define you. Remember that we have the power within, and it goes deeper than simply slapping a label on something. All right? I'll see you all in 2 weeks. I'm off to Kansas City this week for our mid-year meetings, and I think Joe will be there as well, and it's going to be very cold. I'll be thinking of all you back here in the 75-degree weather, so I'll see you in a couple of weeks. All right. Thank you.